I used to take the bus here pretty much every week growing up, and I never once questioned why the bus stop was called Castlegate. Nor did I question why that street's called Castle Street, or why this area in front of me is called Castle Terrace. Well, it turns out it's called Castlegate because once upon a time, this used to be the way to Aberdeen Castle. Aberdeen had a castle. I have no idea how I was able to grow up here and not know that. But there you go. I think when you grow up somewhere, you just don't ask questions like that. I think if I came here as a tourist, the first thing I'd ask is, okay, so where's the castle? So, where is the castle? Well, it was here. This is Castle Hill, and it might not be obvious now because of all these new buildings here, but this would have been the perfect place to put a castle in medieval times because we're high up on a hill, so the castle would have overlooked the entire city, including the harbour. It's strange because there's literally no trace left of the medieval castle that used to stand here, and there's not even a commemorative plaque or a statue or a museum or anything like that. All we have is this monstrous building behind me. So how do we know that Aberdeen Castle even existed? Well, it was first referenced in the Exchequer Rolls of Scotland from 1264. There's a line of expenditure that year for 20 merks for some work done on Aberdeen Castle. A merk was a unit of currency in Scotland at the time. 1 merk was equivalent to 13 shillings and 4pence. In today's money that'd be worth about 500 quid, and 20 merks would be worth about 10 grand. We really have to imagine what kind of work could be done in a medieval castle for 10 grand because they didn't go into detail as to what exactly was done here. And that isn't the only reference to Aberdeen Castle that can be found in historical records. It was actually commonly used as a reference point when describing property boundaries, and there are loads of later references to castle dykes on this site. A dyke is a Scots word for like a short wall, so it's likely that there was a ruin of a castle here for quite some time. I'm a huge fan of the movie Braveheart, and I used to watch it all the time growing up, and what I found when researching this castle was that none other than Edward Longshanks stayed at Aberdeen Castle. He was here between the 14th and the 19th of July, 1296, which would have been just after his victory at the Battle of Dunbar, which was the first major battle in the Scottish Wars of Independence. We know that he stayed here because he was accompanied on his visit by a chronicler who wrote everything down. He may well have stood on this very spot. I mean, it's pretty incredible to think about. His rule over Scotland wasn't to last very long because the year after he stayed here, all hell broke loose in Scotland with Andrew de Moray rebelling in the Highlands and William Wallace in the Lowlands. But at that time, when he was at Aberdeen Castle, he must have been pretty pleased with himself up here overlooking the city. He couldn't have imagined what was about to happen. We don't know exactly what happened to Aberdeen Castle, but we have some clues, so we can make an educated guess. Edward Longshanks had already died by the time it was destroyed, so it was actually his son, Edward II, that had to deal with it. We have a letter that he sent to the captain of his navy at the time, on the 10th of July, 1308. The letter basically said to gather your troops and sail your ships to Aberdeen Castle to break the siege. And then we have another document from a guy called Gilbert Pecky, which is an invoice for the back payment of wages owed from the 8th of July until the 16th of August when he was stationed at Aberdeen Castle. So we know that the castle was under siege from the 10th of July that year, and we can probably assume that the siege was over by the 16th of August. Robert the Bruce at this time was destroying every castle he could get his hands on to prevent them being used by the enemy. So it's assumed that he did the same thing here. I'm a bit annoyed with Robert the Bruce, to be honest. I wouldn't say that to his face if he was still alive, but emboldened by the fact that he's been dead for 700 years, I can say it now. If it wasn't for Robert the Bruce, we would have had a majestic medieval castle overlooking the city of Aberdeen, in much the same way that Stirling or Edinburgh has a castle. It would have changed the way that people thought of Aberdeen, and tourists would have flocked here from all over the world to see it. But instead, what do we get? A dystopian tower block of flats. A medieval castle would have been a shining beacon on the hill here, a reminder of our incredible history and proud heritage. Instead, all I'm reminded of when I pass by this area is that in 2023, a woman beat a man to death here using a kettle. And if that doesn't sum up the decline of Castle Hill, I don't know what does. I like to think that Robert the Bruce felt bad about what he did to Aberdeen Castle, which is why he was so nice to the city of Aberdeen after he became King of Scotland. That statue over my shoulder is a statue of Robert the Bruce, and that thing he's holding up is called the Stockit Charter. It was presented to the city of Aberdeen on the 10th of December 1319, and it basically gave the city the right to make money in return for an annual fee, whether from trading, fishing, tolls, or whatever. The reason that it's called the Stockit Charter is because it also bequeathed the Stockit Forest to the city of Aberdeen, which was previously owned by Robert the Bruce and his family. The Stockit Forest would have been the area that's now known as Mid-Stockit, and I guess at some point they cut all the trees down because now it's mostly just flats. In any case, because Aberdeen was able to make its own money, this led to the development of a common good fund for Aberdeen, and that fund was used to buy the land to build this building behind me, the Marshall College building in the 1800s. And more recently, in the year 1920, it was used to buy Hazelhead Park. My family and I have been going to Hazelhead Park a lot recently because the weather's been nice. It's a really nice park, and I can almost forgive Robert for destroying the castle because he ended up giving us this park. Almost, but not quite. That being said, it's amazing to me that the actions of Robert the Bruce over 700 years ago have a direct impact on my life in the present day. These days, the Aberdeen City Council have been using that fund to get drunk, and I, for one, think that's fair enough. After Robert the Bruce destroyed Aberdeen Castle, it's said that he headed south to Forfar Castle to do the same thing there. Now, Forfar is about 50 miles south of Aberdeen, and in order to get there, you have to cross this river to my left, the River Dee. And back in the 1300s, there was no bridge across this river to use. So what people did was they just crossed it either by foot or on the back of a horse at its most shallow point, which apparently, back in medieval times, was right here at the bottom of a street known as Hardgate. And I'm taking a bit of a leap here, but I'm guessing this is where Robert the Bruce and his guerrilla army of a few hundred men would have crossed the river. I don't have a special effects budget for these videos, so you're going to have to imagine what that would have looked like. In total, after all was said and done, it is said that Robert the Bruce and his men destroyed 137 castles across Scotland. It made it impossible for English soldiers to regain a foothold in the country, and was one of the key strategies used by the Scots to win the wars of independence.